Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're watching us all over the world, welcome to this special edition of the Bakwetu TV. Um, please share this uh, program. It's a very important program. We continue talking about uh, diversifying our economy from copper into agriculture. And the theme for today's program, which is part of the series, is planning for a vibrant agriculture sector in Zambia. Just a bit of a synopsis. Planning in the case of agriculture takes on a very different dimension and level of importance because of sensitivities associated with it. Agriculture affects many other sectors besides being highly political. The creation of a vibrant agriculture sector starts with planning, and various plans already exist. These are continental world agriculture development plans and strategies that are right now awaiting full domestication in the way that current government may think best responds to the UPND manifesto. There are also existing national plans that the current government can follow through on. Our guest today, who is Dr. Christian Chileshe, argues that it's only through robust and comprehensive planning that Zambia's agriculture can move in a consistent and coordinated manner and produce short, medium, and long term outcomes that are a win for all, irrespective of political affiliation. It's, however, the party with the political will create the necessary structural changes that will reap enduring political benefits that will last for a long time to come. Dr. Christian Chileshe, who is our guest today, is a development practitioner with particular focus on entrepreneurship and agribusiness. He has spent much of his 30 years career promoting inclusive and sustainable market systems that work for Africa. Agriculture continues to lend itself as a means to including the poor and lifting many out of poverty. In this third in a series of discussion, Christian continues to provide clear action points for the transformation of Zambia's agriculture and indeed the rest of Africa. A three-phase plan. Today, Dr. Christian Chileshe presents what he refers to as a three-phase plan process. He insists that attainment of vibrant agriculture sector will need to be powered by three-phase planning that takes very deliberate account of the short, medium, and long term. Once again, our guest, wherever you're watching us, welcome to this special edition of the Bakwetu TV. And I will introduce my co host, who is no other than Mr. Nason Bimbe. Mr. Nason Bimbe, welcome to this program.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and welcome to our program, Christian. And also, thank you to everyone who is watching us today. It will be a great show. Please share the link.
Mr. Bimbe, please go ahead and introduce our guest today and ask the first question.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and welcome again, Dr. Christian Chileshe, to our program. As Patrick has already mentioned, this is a series, and this one is the third of those series. There will be some more going on. So before I ask the first question, really, to Dr. Chileshe, I would like to invite Dr. Chileshe to just give us a recap of where we came from with our series, the last two series parts, and what more other series we're going to take, and also what is the end goal for this part of the discussions, the whole part of the series. Over to you, Dr. Chileshe.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I'm glad to be here. And greetings to the viewers that are watching from different parts of the world. We've been going through a series that focuses on the agriculture sector. And in this series, we started by first defining the landscape. And some of the key statements coming out of it is that successful outcomes don't just happen, they are caused. Successful outcomes don't just happen, they are caused. And we recognize in the first of the series that agriculture development does appear to be very complex because of its nature, okay? For a country like Zambia that has well over 70% of the population involved in one form of agriculture or another, even in urban areas. Because of that, there are sensitivities to it. You touch agriculture, you have touched livelihoods for many Zambians. And it's about food also. We did recognize that it can appear complex, but we did say that actually it's not as complex as it may appear. It doesn't mean it's easy to create change. The level of effort has to be high. We did provide examples of countries like Malawi, which at one point did demonstrate that it is possible to transform agriculture and deliver very tangible results. Other countries that have been making great headways, we did give examples, Ethiopia, Egypt, Kenya, and a few others that have demonstrated what is possible with agriculture. We did say that it has to have a multi-sectoral approach. It has to be inclusive because of its nature. You don't deal with experts in agriculture and we say they will solve the problem. It has to do with livelihoods. There are social cultural dimensions to it. There are political dimensions to agriculture. And so because of that, it has to be multi-sectoral, we said. We also said it has to be targeted in terms of entry points. And we highlighted the youth as just one category that we can easily tap into and produce some quick wins. Also emphasized was political will. That was running through the entire discussion. There has to be political will because of the levels of effort required to create transformation. We said it has to be structural change, economic transformation, because there has to be shifting around of resources, the number of people involved in unproductive sectors shifting their capital flow begins to move in that direction, and so on. That was the first. The second one, we now dived into more specifics and said, look, we can develop a very clear roadmap. And in that roadmap, we said there are 4 things that we must think about. Number 1 is planning. And number 2, we said is stakeholder mobilization. Number 3, we said there's need to facilitate a rebranding of the agriculture sector. Number 4, we said there has to be efficient delivery systems. And now today we are going into each one of those, starting with planning, so that we demonstrate that it's not as complicated as the terminologies that we are using. These are things that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chileshe. That was a good recap of what this series is all about and where we're coming from and where we're going to. In the opening statement, Patrick mentioned that planning is essential, and there exists actually some plans that the government can actually tap in. It's not like you are starting from scratch. Christian, can you just run us through what those plans are and whether you think they are workable, and if at all they need tweaks, or you suggest if there are any gaps, and how do we close those gaps within those plans?
Okay. When we talk about agriculture, and because of its nature, we have to think beyond Zambia. Okay? And so we do know that there have been efforts to develop a kind of roadmaps at the continental level, of course, even at the global level. But I think it's easier to start with the continental level because of the interconnectedness of markets and also physical proximity. and the fact that they are related people groups. There are continental roadmaps that have been developed. One is the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. Okay, although it says program, it's not really a program, but it's a kind of a roadmap. And it was important because it rallied African countries together and created this intentionality about developing agriculture in Africa. But things like that needed to be domesticated. I know the AU resolutions that I have actually been involved in, head of state resolutions, have also pointed to agriculture. Issues of productivity, issues of industrialization and agro-processing have been deliberately targeted, and there are actually AU resolutions that have said this we must do. There have been other more recent meetings like Dakar recently this year. Again, this was a reaffirmation at continental level. Now, all these plans, intentions, whatever you might call them, need to be domesticated. I do know that we talk about them in Zambia, and there are various documents that refer to them. A question has been around the extent to which we have incorporated them in the plans that we're working with. That's at continental level. At national level, we did actually make some great efforts at one point and come up with a national agriculture investment plan. It expired, I think, in 2020 or 2021. I think it's 2020, the first one, and there's been a process of working on a new one. This is a good document that needs to be referred to. We need to see what it is about it that worked and what didn't work. So that's just one. There are other policy instruments that we can look at as well. So the argument that I have brought forward is that when we're talking about planning for success in agriculture, we have to look at continent-wide plans or documents. We have to come home and look at different documents that have been developed. Some have been donor-funded programs that have been implemented. There are lessons to be learned from there. I looked at the the regulatory environment, and I found not less than 11 or so, pieces of legislation, acts of parliament that speak to agriculture that we have to look at. So all this is a resource that we have in terms of just documents. Then we can move to people and say we do have people that are experts that have been involved in different initiatives, and they have learned many things from this. How are we bringing all that together so that we do not reinvent the wheel, as it were, but we can build on what already exists, and then we can just say, okay, if the current party in government wants to go in a certain direction, this is what they can pick up on. They can be complete in their plan because they are benefiting from resources that have been developed over time, and they can be very purposeful about moving forward. So these are the things that already exist that we need to look at in terms of planning our way forward.
Thank you, Christian, for highlighting that. I'm just intrigued in the sense that we have all these plans, and sometimes it feels like our agriculture is so disjointed, so ad hoc. Could that speak to the lack of looking at those plans, or is it just the plans don't work?
I think we're not investing in planning, and we've reduced it to an activity where you just quickly go and put something that sounds nice and you put it out. I was looking at the 8th National Development Plan, and I zoomed in on agriculture. Please have a look at it. These are documents that are in the public domain. Now, if we are to match our talk with planning, you would see something very different there. You would see agriculture clearly identified. There would be a chapter really that would look at agriculture if we are saying it's supposed to be a major component. Beyond tourism, and if the emphasis is to shift from mining to agriculture, then we can't, in the same sentence, put them at the same level and say, okay, we need to make sure that agriculture, tourism, and mining, that kind of thing, and manufacturing. And at the end of the day, you're actually sending a very different message. look at the 8th National Development Plan. Look at how agriculture is unpacked, or the lack of unpacking it. That will tell you something about how far we can go with the current or the present planning instruments that we have. Okay, the documents that we have to work with. We have not paid attention to agriculture when it comes to planning. Okay, we talk about it. I mean, it's every other punctuation we have agriculture after that when we're trying to talk about how we're going to move forward. But look at the documents that we have that are supposed to now guide us to implement what we've been saying. They do not place the kind of emphasis on agriculture that comes out when we are having conversations, even at a very high level.
Thank you very much. Before Patrick goes to ask you another question, it's just a thought. You brought out quite good analysis in terms of this plus gives the intention, which is a very, very important. Nothing, as we've been saying, nothing happens by chance. It has to be deliberate. However, you've also highlighted a very good point, which I think I've also myself noticed, is the unpacking. It's good to put a plan, a higher level plan on paper, but it seems to me there is a disconnection taking that and really unpacking it into implementable, or rather plans and policies.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be looking into that. I hope as we go through the discussion, you'll be able to highlight some of the strategies or that we might need to take to start unpacking this and making them really a part of what we are doing, and as well as domesticating what has been done. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Bimbe. Christian, that was fantastic, well articulated. Moving forward, you've mentioned that agriculture affects many other sectors, not just agriculture itself, besides being political. And also, you've stated in all the last programs that agriculture affects almost every Zambian in one way or the other. And also, you've mentioned that a lot of Zambians now, in the middle class Zambians, they've got a farm or land where they farm. And you've also mentioned that agriculture is one sector that can create a lot of jobs and move a lot of poor people who are suffering, into prosperity. But then my question is, who should be involved?
Okay.
Because you've mentioned planning for a vibrant agriculture sector. Who should be involved in this planning?
Okay. Before I actually even tackle that one directly, let me now just highlight something here. If you are going to address agriculture, there has to be some structural changes. Okay, meaning there are some things that we must begin to work on, whose results may only show, 3-5 years or even more time ahead of us. But that does not fit very well within the political cycle. Okay, so you have a party in government that has 5 years and will be seeking a re-election after that. So unless we are able to demonstrate results within the medium term, again we lose that the political will that we need. Because remember, the people that are ultimately making decisions are politicians, and they're interested in staying in power, and they're going to election every 5 years. So how we break it down as technocrats, first of all, must capture the long-term issues that must address the structural issues and create structural change. Some of them will not happen within 5 years. But then we must have issues that can be captured within a period of 3 years. Okay, and in the last show, I did bring out a plan that I insisted can work within 3 years if there is political will and participation of different actors. So you have that kind of medium term where you have between 3 to 5 years, some results must show very clearly, okay? Meaning that the implementation must start early in the term of a political party. For the technocrats, we collect the things that happen beyond 5 years, then we collect the things that can happen within about 3 years, and then we also must collect things that must happen within a year or so. Because remember, agriculture has to do with food for the most part. So whatever we do must not create a total disruption within an agriculture cycle, a planting season. There must be things that enable a cycle to show that it is moving in the right direction. Some shifts must happen to motivate market players to begin to move in, to begin to improve on how agriculture is being done. So the three-phase approach I've referred to takes account of those three aspects. So in terms of who must be involved, you're talking about, number one, the people directly engaged in agriculture right now. You have a large pool of smallholders. They are represented through various, associations, cooperatives, and so on. Then you have large-scale farmers that are also represented mostly by ZNFU. If you talk about ZNFU, really, you're talking about the larger players, okay? But there has to be a mechanism of making sure the small-scale farmers, the subsistence farmers, are well represented on the table, okay? That is important. It must be underlined. Beyond that, we want to involve other industrial players, captains of industry, those that may already be in agriculture because they're engaged in some activities, agro-processing, or maybe they're fabricating or manufacturing what is needed within the agriculture sector, or their off-takers. We must involve them. We must also involve those that may not necessarily be involved in agriculture, but because they're entrepreneurs, they may be able to see opportunities. There may be very good reason why they have ventured into other sectors, but not in agriculture. Those have to be given a seat on the table. They are important players who can create new openings. You have to involve financial sector players because financing is needed in agriculture. They have to be part of the process of planning so that they can own what comes out of it. They can understand it, and therefore they can see how they can facilitate the deployment of finance into the sector. That is important. Politicians must have a seat on the table. Yes, naturally they will be, but we must deliberately identify them and see how they can also provide input. In terms of technical expertise, we must look beyond agriculture. We did say that agriculture has a social-cultural dimension to it. So because of that, in the last show, I did insist that you want to have anthropologists sitting on the table because they will give us dimensions that ensure that when we roll out a plan, we take account of realities at the social-cultural level. You want to have other researchers and other technical experts also sitting on the table because they may give us perspectives that we have not understood previously. Another area that we are beginning to define very clearly is the issue of ICT, because it creates platforms on which agriculture works better. It actually makes things that were not previously possible doable. Technology just creates new products altogether. Previously, we would say it facilitates efficiency in what we're already doing, but now we can see and clearly see and know that actually products are born once we work off a technology platform. So if you can bring all those components together, and this requires a thoughtful process, very intentional, then we can begin to craft plans that have covered angles, that have a very high chance of success, that has buy-in from those that are relevant to the success of the plan. So in terms of planning, that's how wide we have to go. We have to structure it. There are people who understand how to go about structuring these things. There are people who are trained to facilitate such processes. We must recognize expertise in the different fields that can come to bear on how we go about planning. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, if you got any question or follow-up question.
Uh, y- that's thank you very much. That's really fantastic. You've just laid it out so nicely. So we need, obviously, you said you need structural changes, but then we need to keep an eye to the future. That's the long term.
Yeah.
While at the same time, we need to create an environment that can show results very quickly, because we have to understand that we live in a political cycle, which is 5 years, and as usual, politicians want to get re-elected or wants to get into power. So those are kind of good. I like also the way you've broken down of the people, the kind of people or sectors that needs to be involved in this planning, which is very interesting. And I'm just wondering, wow, this is really, really good. It makes it very, very clear. So then we have, if we can have all this, we got the plans, we look at the international one, we look at the local one. You talked about the eighth national development plans, put it together, that starts unpacking. So we've got all these sectors, bring experts together. How would the process then be managed? How should that process look like?
Yeah, that's a very important aspect, because look, it's one thing to bring experts together to create different layers of planning. Information is gathered at one point with the participation of many. It's synthesized and then distilled. You have stakeholders sitting and then validating that, saying, okay, is this what we want? What is missing? What are we not able to do, maybe in the immediate, and things like that. So we create that 3-phase plan, and we know the different things that can be done in different time horizons. Okay, so that is the whole process of planning. It's not as complicated as it may sound. It's being done in other parts of the world, and it's become part of the normal process of ensuring that you get it right. Because if you can't get the plan right, then you haven't even started. Okay, whatever follows after that is not going in the right direction. So once that is clear, now it is about managing the process, making sure that it has the best chance of taking off. Number one, political leadership. Minus that one, nothing is going to work. We have seen from experiences that are very well recorded that unless there's political will and leadership from the very top, it is very unlikely that we'll see significant success in the planning process itself and in the implementation of the plan. In the case of Malawi, for instance, the president himself took up the portfolio of agriculture. He says he will be the minister of agriculture, and he ran with it. Okay, we're not advocating for the fact that the president should be minister of agriculture, but what we're saying is that the involvement of the presidency has to be high. There has to be a mechanism that ensures that the presidency is very much involved in the whole process, is kept informed. There are milestones that have been set so that it is easy for the presidency to actually keep up with what is being done during the planning process and in the implementation. Last show, Mr. Bimbe, you had referred to a working group that has been set up. Okay, I just wish it could be shown on the screen, or at least viewers can be given a link to go and have a look at it. You have a grouping that is important for this process but that is not representative of the actors within agriculture sector. Now, if that is the group that is speaking to the presidency, you can just imagine eventually what will happen. They'll be saying what they feel with all good intentions, what they feel should happen, but that will not be the complete story. That will be just part of it. And if you try to run with only a part of it, you're not likely to go far. Okay? So it is a grouping that is needed, but it cannot be the only grouping that engages with the presidency. There has to be a mechanism where all the voices can be heard and they're captured in a mechanism that allows ultimately the presidency to have close oversight over this process, because it has to be managed well. So I think for me, in terms of how it should be managed, there has to be a structure that goes all the way to the presidency and is held accountable by the presidency, even if it's going to work through a particular ministry, but involving a cross-section of stakeholders that go beyond agriculture.
I think that's fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, any follow-up question or comment?
I just want, it's not a follow-up question, it's just maybe for our viewers. You spoke about the three-phase planning. Probably you could just mention it again. What are those phases and how do they fit together?
Come again, the line was breaking, I didn't hear that, sir.
In your last in the last discussion, in the response you gave, you did talk about these three-phase plans, and okay. Just for the sake of our viewers, would you just elaborate a little bit on those three-phase plan, on the three-phase
okay.
plan? What are those?
So I'm using the term three-phase, and I think it's easier to connect to it. You know, when you want to get something done, you are engaged in major activity that requires electricity. You often be told, no, here, sir, you need three-phase. Otherwise, you won't be able to power the machinery that you are working with. So in that analogy works even in this particular case. You actually need the kind of three-phase because you want to have enough power to actually build this plan and cause it to take off. The three-phase plan includes, number one, you must think long-term. Agriculture requires structural transformation. It's about socio-economic transformation, nothing short of that, okay? Because there are things sitting in the wrong places, there are habits that have been developed, there are systems that are currently running year after year that should not even be, okay? And we have got used to that. We've become quite comfortable and we complain, but things keep happening the same way. To uproot that and to change and move it to another place is not going to be easy because, you know, something that has, a plant that has stayed in one place has grown roots. It has gone deep. So number one is now a process that creates structural change and requires time, okay? That must be identified and a mechanism for working on that, and with people and resources allocated and accountability. There has to be a mechanism for medium-term kind of processes, and I'm using medium-term here to loosely mean 3 to 5 years. Things that can happen within the political cycle of 5 years. You can't do everything every year. There are some things that the first year may feel bad, the second year begin to look good, by the third year there are clear results that are showing. That is probably one of the most critical component in this three-phase, because that's where a lot of work has to happen. That is where a lot of focus will be, to kind of disrupt the way things are this year and to begin to, you know, kind of construct them in the coming year so that they begin to show results by the third to the fourth year. There's a lot of work that has to happen on that one. But also, the third component in the phase is the short term. We are going towards the planting season. We have to make changes, but the changes must not be to the extent that they completely disrupt the process of agriculture, because we have to grow, we have to eat, we have to sell, and so on. So it is a managed process of disruption that creates change each year, but in a managed manner, so that by the 3rd to the 4th year, we begin to see results. And then we know that by the 7th, 8th, 9th year, we would have completely transformed the sector. And this is a process that even a different leader, a different government can follow, because it is not political, it's purely technical. It is providing very clear building blocks, okay? So it is something that even a new party in government may buy into, because they're able to see that it serves their interest. It produces results that they're also interested in. So long-term, medium-term, short-term, these are the 3 phases that have to be kept in mind. It sounds very obvious as we discuss. I have been in planning processes at national level. I can assure you this gets lost. As people look at competing, issues, this gets lost. In the end, you have something that has been put together and some things have fallen off. And in the end, we have either the long-term completely compromised and we keep going in circles, we have no medium-term process that can show results after some time, or we completely disrupt the short-term. Usually the short-term is favored by many. There's been an instance where the short-term was not very well favored, okay? And there was complaints, but then because the medium-term was looked into, things settled in a better way a couple of decades ago. But for the most part, the short term is favored. Now, the moment you focus on the short term, you cannot create structural change. It becomes difficult for you to sustain even what you're doing in the short term. Look at how FISIP is struggling. And now we have said we're going to change it into something else. We changed the name. I looked at what it's supposed to do. For all intents and purposes, it is still a more efficient FISIP. But even at its best, it's a social welfare program. So how does it create structural change? There is room for that, okay? But let's recognize it for what it is. If it's a social welfare program, it shouldn't even be sitting in agriculture. It should collaborate with agriculture, but not necessarily sitting in agriculture. Then the agricultural budget should now be saying, how do we look beyond the short term? How do we create structural change? And then you have resources that can do that. Right now, it is very difficult to find resources within agriculture that can do that because of the amounts of money allocated to components that are not necessarily contributing to change, but are more or less maintaining status quo.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chileshe. That was well articulated. We've got somebody in the background. Maybe I'll bring Jenny in. Jenny Featherstone. I hope you've been watching, and we would love to see your face.
Okay.
You know, yeah. If you can put your video on, and
Sure.
you can ask a question, you can comment on what we've discussed so far. You're welcome, Jenny.
Yes, I'm not very technical, just having trouble getting my video on.
Okay, you can still ask a question or you can comment on what we're talking about now.
I'm just wondering about the smart agriculture. How we move forward with that?
And can you come again? And Jen, can you introduce yourself also? Where are you calling from? Where are you from? Are you calling from?
Choma in Southern Province in Zambia.
Okay.
And we have a small. I'm with a project called Choma Alcohol and Drug Rehabilitation Organization, which seems a bit odd that I'm here with you guys. But
Okay.
we make biochar, which I know that you must know is a soil improver. And we've got people at Mochipapa Research just doing trials with it at the moment to see how it can, how smart agriculture can benefit from adding biochar into the soil. So that's why I'm here with you, really, just to get to know you a bit more. And Mr. Kapapula gave me your address for this webinar.
Okay. So what is your, okay, Christian, have you Did you get a question or comment?
I didn't pick the question. I picked many other things, but at the point at which she was raising the kind of question, the line was breaking.
Yeah, sorry for that. Yes, I'm interested in your views on this, on smart agriculture, on how we move forward with climate change, if that's relevant.
Okay, no, certain 100%. In fact, in terms of talk, even documents that we have right now, they are placing a lot of emphasis on that. If you look at the 8th National Development Plan, there's a lot of emphasis on how we can adapt climate smart agriculture, which effectively takes us back to some of the things we've been neglecting over the years. How we can use fertilizers that are not necessarily chemical, how we can adopt, if you like, technologies and know-how that creates cycles within our agricultural production that helps replenish our soils. Now, that is big. That cannot be overemphasized. If you look at Southern Province and the situation that it is in right now, part of the challenge has been the use of chemical fertilizers, maybe not even in very well managed. We have fertilizers that are brought into the country irrespective of the regions. Okay, so we have very standard way of getting fertilizers and using them in probably similar proportions. Generally, people don't understand a lot of things, and these are chemical fertilizers. We cannot overemphasize the need to begin to move away from some of these practices that are causing a lot of harm to more sustainable practices. And those are the things I'm referring to as the structural changes that may take 7, 8, 9, 10 years. That must be kept on the table, and we keep moving inch by inch every year because we know we must get there. There is no other place we must eventually settle at. Otherwise, we are heading towards serious problems. Okay? So now, if we can have very clear and deliberate long-term plans that begin to create structural change that takes us towards more sustainable agriculture practices, okay, then we will see ourselves moving year by year, because this is not something we can do very quickly. It involves allocation of resources, it involves building systems, it involves creating awareness and hand-holding and behavioral change in the way we do our agriculture, okay? So it is a process that must be sustained over a number of years. Right now, if you ask me, I do not think we have this agenda being championed at the highest level, which we must. This must be championed right from the presidency, giving marching orders to the relevant ministries, collaborating, ensuring that within the next decade or so, our agricultural practices shift towards more sustainable mechanisms. It's not happening right now, but it needs to happen.
We're challenging it from the lowest level, I think.
Come again?
I said, I think as a small group, we are challenging it from the lowest level. We are teaching small-scale farmers how to make biochar in an artisan way, where they only need a pick and shovel, and then they can push it in their land, and it stays there for hundreds of years, sequestering carbon, but also improving their soil.
Exactly. And you know, there are great initiatives out there. I've come across a number of them, and I know there are some players that have been at it for as long as I can remember, and they have continued. But the impact is limited by political will. The impact is limited by the profile that we give such, because if there is an initiative that is being done on a small scale, that is producing results, why are we not profiling it countrywide? Why are we not replicating that? Why are we not investing in exactly what you are doing? You know, and that's where the challenge is. Without that, such good initiatives end up being crowded out over time, and we do not get as far as we could have. I've seen great initiatives gain momentum, but over time they are crowded out and things are more or less forgotten. Very unfortunate, but we need to do things differently going forward. We need political will. We need leadership right from the highest level.
Yes, thank you for that.
Most
I think the ministry is trying a little bit because they're doing trials with biochar and fertilizer right now, and chemical fertilizers right now, which they want to extend for a 3-year trial. So we're hopeful that, you know, at least we will have published results on how biochar will work in the soil. And it's a very simple process for small-scale farmers if they can get hold of that idea, to improve their land with biochar and manure.
Right. No, that's great, and I appreciate your optimism. Unfortunately, I'm not as optimistic. I'm a little more skeptic because you can imagine, I'm in probably my 3rd decade of seeing good initiatives, raising hopes and expectations, and seeing how, without political will, they have not gone as far. These are life-transforming activities, you know, hands down. But this is my 3rd decade of watching such things start and show promising results. They are recorded. There is no shortage of evidence of the fact that they produce good results. But at the end of the day, we have not moved on them. That is why I am not as optimistic, and that's why I'm banging at the door of political will. If you've noticed, I keep repeating that, because unless there are changes there, well-intended projects showing clear results, well-documented, will not have the kind of effect that we need. The lower level technocrats, Minister of Agriculture, will participate, they will buy into it, but they can only go as far as political will enables. That is the major constraint. But all the best, and I hope things work out and we keep learning from that.
That was fantastic, Christian. And Jenny, thank you so much for coming coming in and ask such a important question. Thank you once again. I've got 2 other people who've logged in. Alan, you've been coming in and out. Alan Chileshe, any comment, any question before I move to Seviso, Mulele Seviso? Over to you, Alan. Yeah, Alan is quiet. Mulele, okay, Alan has come. Okay, any comment, any question, Alan?
It is very bad, so
Your line is very bad, Alan.
since my internet was bad, I restricted myself to just listening.
Okay, no problem.
Maybe he could type the question and then we can
You
read
can
it
type
out.
the question on the chat. You know, there's a private chat here. Can you see it? You can type your question, Alan, there on the private chat. Okay, we'll leave you in the background, Alan.
Yeah.
Mulele Seviso, before you come in, Babimbe, Mulele Seviso, any comment, any question so far?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry that I joined quite late, but I think this is a very important discussion. And by the way, I am from the Ministry of Agriculture.
Oh,
I work
fantastic.
at the Ministry of Agriculture headquarters in the Department of Agriculture.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so the discussion itself is very good. I do hear what Mr. Chileshe is saying, and I tend to actually kind of, I don't know if I can say, feel that really a lot has to be done to move us to where we are supposed to be. From my personal analysis, I think just the way we view agriculture itself needs to change. The sector is a very important sector, but I think we tend to focus more on, I don't know if I can call it firefighting, and agriculture tends to be left in the background. And so the change needs to move from where we leave it in the background everybody does acknowledge that it's so important. But now, marrying that sense of importance with meaningful action, I think that's where we need to really improve. And I can say that instead of waiting for a catastrophe or a disaster, we need to um, be, what can I say, use these relatively favorable times to improve and invest and secure ourselves. Because at the moment we have not really like been hit by a major famine and things like that. But we need to really improve and work harder and not just assume that things will always be as they are. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we have relatively favorable circumstances, and we need to take advantage of these circumstances. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Mulele. Over to you, Dr. Christian.
Yeah, no, that's a very important statement that has been made there, and I think it's from a person who sees these things. They are schooled in these things. Their eyes are open. Now, can you imagine? You are living hand to mouth in an environment where if something goes wrong, disaster strikes. That's a very difficult situation to operate in, even as a technocrat, because for you see it clearly. We have accepted what is actually not normal. We cannot live hand to mouth, grow, eat, grow again, eat, and then say, no, we'll grow some more, we've run out, and we carry on like that. That's a very dangerous point to be at, and we've somehow allowed it to carry on. Imagine what others think about us. Step away from Zambia, go to a more developed environment. Imagine how they look at this situation. These are very intelligent human beings who understand these things, very well trained. Why are they not seeing the danger that is just waiting, a disaster waiting to happen? Why are they not doing anything about it? Okay, so it's a very dangerous situation to be in, and that is why of the three phases, there's a strategic line where we are shifting things slowly and carefully. Okay, one of the areas that I mentioned last week was around rebranding agriculture. If you look at any of the plans, any of them, there's nowhere where there is deliberate allocation of resources, even discussion around rebranding agriculture in the minds of Zambians, in the minds of everyone. What is our perception towards agriculture, the general perception? What is the reality? What is it that is possible about agriculture? How do we move from where we are to where we should be in terms of how we think about agriculture? This is not just about subsistence farmers. Look at the middle class and medium income earners who have small holdings in the peri-urbans. They live in the city, they have what they call farms, okay? How many of them are productive in those farms? Many of those farms are surviving because the owner earns a salary. Okay, so we keep putting money in, it's just an expensive hobby. We see something grow, but it's not really profitable, and then we grow another year. So it's not just about, the problem is not with the subsistence farmers. The problem affects all of us, the national mindset towards agriculture. Okay, high income earners are investing in different sectors. Why are they not putting money in agriculture? Of course, there could be good reasons, but then we must address those good reasons. If it's high risk, then we must address that. So it is about investing resources and time, rebranding agriculture by showcasing what is possible, providing certainty about what is possible, so that the different players can go in knowing what can shift. I did a study a few years ago under USAID project. There were two of us with a colleague. And I remember when we spoke to industrial players, one of the major messages that came out was, look, we need predictability in government policy and direction. They're saying, look, we may not even like what government has decided about the agriculture sector, but we are able to reposition ourselves to still see how we can still function and still make the most of that. Okay? It's not about us liking what they have decided or not liking. It is about knowing what they have decided and being confident they will stick to what they have decided so that we can adjust ourselves to that new reality and still engage and know what we can get out of the agriculture sector. So the fact that policy keeps changing so often, things are being moved around without a clear roadmap, which is what I'm advocating for in this program, which is we need to plan, set a direction, be able to communicate a long-term, medium, and short-term, so that when players come in, they know the direction you're going, they can make decisions around how they're going to engage. That is part of risk management for entrepreneurs, and that needs to happen. So if we can rebrand agriculture and show where we are going and work towards giving a very different image of what it is, we, in the next 5, 7, 9 years, will have a very different sector with very different resources being channeled towards it.
Mr. Bimbe, over to you. You wanted to ask a question before Mulele came in.
Yes, it's a question as well as probably an observation or comment. I've listened to what Jenny, Mulele, and Christian have spoken about. This structural change, it seems, I mean, it has highlighted itself in different forms. I'm just wondering, I'm just curious in the sense that we seem in Zambia, agriculture seems to be, of course, if we take out animal husbandry, it seems to be centered around one thing, and that is fishing. So I think you've ably talked about it, Christian, that it distorts the whole thing. It creates this problem of not moving forward. As it is, I'm just wondering, could FISIP have a component that can help the recipients to understand that chemical fertilizer is actually bad in a way, and try to help them start weaning off from really crying for this free, or so to speak, fertilizer from FISIP. I can understand FISIP has got other dimension, which I don't want to go through in, which is the political and the vested interests that come with it, but just from the recipient point of view.
Okay. From a purely technical angle, we are supposed to be transitioning. Okay, we're addressing the short term. We do need chemical fertilizers right now. Okay, but then we know that we cannot sustain the level at which we're using chemical fertilizers in the long term. So what mechanisms, and this is the three phase. So the long-term phase, which may very much work in the background for the most part, is a phase that is now seeing how we can incrementally shift, because this is about food and livelihoods. You cannot just completely disrupt it. How do we incrementally phase? Who do we target for this new approach? What about the young people that are just getting into agriculture or may not be thinking about agriculture? How do we attract them? Maybe expose them to new techniques, the new methods, work with them, because they're still at a formative stage. They can be easy adapters of new ways of doing things. So maybe from there we begin to popularize and so on, what Jenny and the others are doing. So now that process needs to start now and work its way over time. So even within the FISIP portfolio, once we begin to see tangible results, we can actually begin to factor it in, to begin to say, okay, from a certain point going forward, we're going to support them in a different way that encourages sustainable approaches. Okay, support them to begin to prepare the fields differently. You know, unless we can create that transition of moving away from use of chemical fertilizers towards more and more of alternatives, okay, then we are never going to move. We'll be talking about it, we'll be acknowledging the dangers, but we are not going to move anywhere away from it. We will probably never completely drop use of chemical fertilizers. But if we can balance it off with alternatives, then we limit the impact that chemical fertilizers and even just the tilling methods that we use. It's more than just the fertilizers. It is what methods are we using to till the land? Are we not disturbing the soil structure? Are we not making it easy for erosion? Is this not leading eventually to land becoming unusable after some time? So what else should we be doing? So there are many mechanisms that it's a portfolio of mechanisms that must be introduced to begin to create alternatives so that even if we never move away completely from chemical fertilizers, we have this healthy balance that helps in terms of sustainability. You know, we are fortunate in Zambia. We have about 21 million people in a land size that is so huge that we have no shortage of land in Zambia, by the way. Okay, so it is possible that as we implement alternatives, even if we remain with some use of chemical fertilizers, but because of the options that we have with the land that we have, it is possible to allow sections of the land to rest, okay? Allow it to be overgrown and allow it to recover, or do crop rotation so that you can actually use natural mechanisms to kind of put back nutrition in soils that have been affected by agricultural practices. So it's a portfolio of mechanisms that influence what we use and how we practice agriculture. That must start now and work its way over time. It will take only patriotic Zambians who are thinking not just about the next election to begin to throw these things in and to begin to work with them, because these things are not likely to show short-term results, but if they are communicated very well, there is a component of the Zambian electorate that will still appreciate in the short term, but who will also remember in the longer term. And beyond being in power, leaving a legacy that is remembered, looking back even after having been in office and seeing that people are better off because I passed through the system. I think in the end, that is worth much more than what would have been gained by the short time that people can be in office.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Christian. Very good points there and well articulated. I like the comments made by Mulele and Jenny. Christian, it looks like you mentioned earlier that there've been so many plans from 1964. Look at Kaunda. Kaunda sang so much about liberalizing our economy from copper, which is a wasting asset, into agriculture. There were so many plans. They even started, developing farming blocks. People were retiring, moving into those farming blocks. But we've never diversified. There've been so many plans. Under Mwanawasa, if you remember, Sikatana started growing winter maize. But we're still lagging behind. And you've also mentioned that everybody, including politicians, they acknowledge that agriculture is very important. But the plans haven't been, implemented. And Jenny mentioned that ministers are involved in what they are doing. But the question is, for how long? Are those plans going to be implemented in the short term, medium term, long term? And we also mentioned that plans, there should be predictability. But then my question is, Christian, what are the key aspects that must be taken into account or considered for us to plan towards a vibrant agriculture sector?
Yeah, one of them, I think we cannot run away, is the political interest, legitimate political interests. Okay, I'm not talking about the abuse of office by politicians. But we must recognize that there are legitimate political interests. And the biggest problem is with us, one of the biggest problems is with us technocrats. We fail to recognize this. You are developing a plan that does not take account of legitimate political interests. How far is that plan going to go? Okay? So if we can balance it off, because as technocrats, we see how we need to change the whole landscape. And this will not happen very quickly. It will require painful measures. Okay? When do we propose those painful measures? Like I mentioned in the previous show, if we know that a party is just getting into office, they're still early in their term, that is when, as technical experts, we should recommend the painful measures. That will be disruptive. That may even actually be unpopular. But if they can begin to show results towards the end of the 5-year term, then people appreciate that and will still vote for that, hopefully vote for that political party based on the results they have shown. So we have to have these key selling points and respond to genuine political interests. Okay, that's one factor. Number two is we have to prepare our plan in such a way that we can market it to all other stakeholders. The plan must be sellable to captains of industry who can deploy capital, the financial institutions. It must be sellable to the millions of Zambians that are engaged, okay, in agriculture. Okay, it also must capture the non-technical agriculture aspects that go with agriculture. It inevitably implicates other ministries. I mean, if you're talking about sustainable agriculture, if there's a ministry of green economy and or natural environment or whatever it may be called, then it's implicated. It's a partner. The Minister of Commerce, Trade and Industry, Science and Technology is implicated, and so on. Agriculture transcends various spheres of life. And because of that, when we are planning for agriculture, we must also recognize this interconnectedness and include in the plan how we're going to link and tap into what is being done in the other areas of the economy and in the other ministries. So we have to take account of all those issues for us to come up with something that we can say, yes, this is the summary plan. This is how we can break it down and drill down multiple levels. This is a lot of work in terms of effort. It's not very complicated. It's 2, 3, 4 months of concerted efforts, packaging it adequately so that it can respond to the different issues of the different interest groups, using that to now market agriculture and change the face of agriculture, and ensuring that we can capture quick wins that will feed back into improving the level of support and participation by those that need to be part of this process going forward.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Christian. Over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. I'm really enjoying this and learning a lot, actually. Yeah, you just mentioned about these linkages, because it seems now, in my little thinking, agriculture actually transcends, it's a kind of a cross-cutting across ministerial departments. For example, those you've mentioned, I could add in probably infrastructure and whatever it's called, because there's the moving of products and inputs, the storage capacity of those that comes out of that agriculture. So,
and the building of dams,
and all sorts of things.
If you are going to have more than one planting period, then you are looking at infrastructure that harvests water and allows for cropping to happen outside our natural rain season.
Which is correct. So that is even the Ministry of Water and Natural Development that is involved as well. Environmental Council. So that is a very elaborate. it's just a pity that we are not kind of seeing all these pieces together. Of course, we understand there are other issues that can crop up. That is a very good one. So if we have, assuming we have this best intention, we have this grouping, we start looking at all these plans and coming up with all the various things that we need in the planning, understanding what we need. So how should this plan then be implemented if we've done it nicely?
First of all, we must recognize that while the Ministry of Agriculture will coordinate the implementation, implementation cannot completely happen in the ministry. Okay? That is why when you talk about the budget for the ministry, we're looking at just core activities that can catalyze agriculture development. We're not looking at the ministry to be able to do everything that is needed for agriculture development. No, it is for the core functions, for leadership to be provided in terms of hands-on, leading the way, because ultimately science must lead, okay? The science of agriculture must lead, but it must be informed by the various social cultural aspects. So we bring in other experts and so on, and we keep going. We consider political aspects, even when we are going to respond to political interests. We must not, at the end of the day, neglect the science. It is within the parameters that science gives us, okay? So the ministry runs with the science. That's very important, okay? But then there are many other things that must happen. Okay, how are we working CEEC? How are we working with other institutions of government, with even an institution like ZESCO? Because rural electrification must be, or even just the extension of the grid must be informed by our economic priorities. And if we are saying that we are trying to develop agriculture, part of the infrastructure that is required is electrification, the distribution of the grid. You know, let's ask ourselves, with all the water that we have, how have we depended on rain to produce our food? With all the water that we have, how have we failed to extend? With all the sunlight that we have, how have we failed to just go in a big way, extend solar power generation? So there are many issues here that come in, because, you know, solar power, for instance, in private sector investment into solar power generation doesn't just happen in abstract. Number one, there has to be certainty in government policy. You don't want to invest in it, and when you connect into the grid, you are not being paid. You know, we've had cases like that. Okay, I won't mention any private sector institution, and they begin to struggle. Okay, that's number one. But even if you're not going to connect into the main grid, if you are very elaborate about agriculture development, it is possible to set up power generation facilities that do not feed into the grid, that supply. This is something we have done many years. Go to Northwestern Province, you find locations where hydroelectric power is being generated privately and being distributed privately, okay? So it is possible to set up major solar facilities that provide electricity without necessarily connecting to the grid. But this depends on the agricultural development process. Is there sufficient market? Can they identify a particular market for the energy that they're going to generate? So there are many things that we can think about. But at the end of the day, you know, we must create an environment in which players can come in, can invest, can make money, but in the process they're contributing to development. That starts with a plan that can be shared to different stakeholders, a plan that when looked at is believable because it's comprehensive, it addresses all the important issues. And based on that, and with the certainty that is emerging from government policy, you can have investment that can be plowed in, because it takes a few years for you to recover your money, and you know nothing major will happen in that time, so you're willing to put your money into it. Those are some of the issues that we have to think about if we're going to actually roll out this plan and begin to implement it. Let's keep our constituency, the users of this plan in mind. Let's keep the other ministries and government institutions in mind, and let's make sure that different aspects of that plan that are relevant to them are made visible and available. We engage around those areas, and you will see multiple activities happening in different places, because they are driven by their own interests and the mandate that they have. If it's government institutions, the private sector may be driven by profit motives, but they are clear on what component of that plan relates to them and how they can connect to it. That is key.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Christian. You've made very important points about why agriculture is so important, and you've also mentioned that it transcends more than one ministry. And I was so shocked when I learned about that. Looks like almost every ministry is very critical towards the planning of a vibrant agriculture sector or diversification. But then, Christian, how will you make sure as a country that plans stay on course and achieve what is intended?
Okay. That's a very important question, because at the very planning stage, because in this show we're talking about most planning, really, to understand what it will take. At the very planning stage, we must plan for the mechanisms for implementation. This sounds obvious, but it's forgotten. If you're going to say we need to do this and we need to do this and we need to do this, and you put it on the table and it's very clear and very nice, it's possible to reach the end of the planning process and then come and ask the question, so how will this be implemented? And then you discover that has not been kept in mind, because it doesn't happen at the end of the planning process, because it is building the answer to that question within the planning process itself. We have to keep in mind that what we are working on as a plan has to be implemented. If it's going to be implemented, then as we are planning, we must build in mechanisms that enable implementation. Okay? So there has to be very clear vehicles that are going to do it. The Minister of Agriculture, I did say, will lead policy and planning. The Directorate of Policy and Planning is a very important directorate. That directorate needs to be not only staffed with individuals across different disciplines, not just agriculture, but it also needs to be given the space to actually come out and provide guidance on how we're going to move. Okay, that is important. That's at the core of how we are going to make sure it stays on course, because there has to be monitoring and evaluation mechanisms built in that provide early indication of things going wrong or early indication of successes that are being scored, so that we can stop things from going wrong. We can do more of the things that are going right. So the core is the ministry, and with the planning and policy department directorate within that. Beyond that, you have to have a structure of stakeholders, kind of standing groupings, if you like, that are always there to review the process as it moves. Okay, so stakeholders who contributed to the development of the plan must own the plan. It must not be handed over to somebody else to implement. They must own the plan. So they must be involved in the process of overseeing how it is going and how we can make it work better. Remember that there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of adjustment of the plan as we are moving, incorporating things we didn't think about, or emerging issues, dropping off those that are not contributing to moving forward. So this structure of standing groupings or committees must be there, so that they are providing oversight, they are informing how things are going, they are raising alarms when things are not working well. They have a way of escalating issues that they feel are not going well. And that is why I still insist overall leadership has to be at the presidency, because ultimately the president's ear must be brought to bear to what is working well, because he wants to talk about it as a politician, but also what is not working well, because he or she wants to intervene to ensure those things don't go wrong. So there has to be a structure that has to be in place beyond the ministry that can provide oversight with overall leadership from the presidency.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, over to
Yeah,
you.
thank you. I just wanted to just add something. I don't know what your views, Christian. We talked about the various stakeholders that needs to come to bear if we are going to have a good planning, good plans, and good implementation. I'm just curious, what do you say about academic proper researchers to getting involved? Because you mentioned about learning. It tend to think that in most of the things that we tend to do, especially big government projects, what I've seen, I might be wrong, most of the learning is actually distilled by foreign researchers rather than our own researchers. Is there a problem in terms of funding that research, or is it just the academics are not interested in taking up some of these roles? Because I believe they can play a very good oversight role, as well as distilling the learning that then can be scaled up to other people.
I think that's an important point, because there are major mindset issues that have to be addressed. Major mindset issues that have to be addressed beyond even agriculture. If we have a bad reading culture, we will not see even what is available within the documents that we have. I think you've come across the saying that if you want to hide something from an African, put it in a book. And when I'm involved in facilitation, I actually add and say, then give that book to the African. I have been involved in research where information has been collected, data sets have been collected, information synthesized. Part of that info, a copy of that has been given to us, a copy taken by whoever funded. They're going to mine that data, understand what that data is saying, and understand what needs to be done to change things. We're going to sit with that data. Then when we want to do a Master of Science in agricultural economics, I'm just using one example, we'll be busy going all the way to Michigan State University to go and learn how to come and solve a problem here. Okay? There's a wealth of knowledge there. They have understood what needs to be done. They have understood what not to do. And in the interest of Africa, I would even dare say that some institutions have even understood how to make sure that we don't develop. What is critical that must be missing? You know, it is possible for you to be told everything that you need to know how to create change, but remove something critical that will make sure that whatever you do, it will look like you're going in the right direction, but you'll never break through. Remember, there are geopolitics, there are economic beliefs that stand on the premise that if certain countries develop, they will tilt the balance of power, and it will affect the flow of resources or commodities, and it will negatively affect us. So there are people out there right now who are not apologetic about that, and they don't even think it's anything personal. They just feel that the success of one part of the world depends on another part staying lower, so that there's a flow, you know, and they feel that is reality, hard reality, but yes, still reality. So we cannot trust foreign institutions to tell us how to develop our own country. We have the data sets. They have not been hiding that. In many cases, that is left with us. Publications are made. Some of them are locked, yes, but there's enough out there that enables us to actually say, let's harness this and work with. Now, the academicians have an important role to play in that kind of a process. But again, there are mindset issues. If I got my PhD so that I can show everybody that I have a PhD, and once I have a PhD, I have arrived, now I must get the benefits of that PhD. After all, I worked very hard, okay? So if I have a mindset like that, how am I going to now apply my advanced research skills in contributing to my country? That becomes a badge of honor. The fact that you are a professor, you are doctor somebody, it's just a badge of honor, and I'm looking at now the benefits that must flow with that. I have met many highly schooled individuals that are not necessarily educated. And the Ministry of Agriculture, just like maybe the Ministry of Health, is full of them. We have a lot of people who have advanced degrees, okay? And I call them highly schooled, but not necessarily educated, because education is transformational. It changes the way you think and do things. But schooling can create a certain level of awareness. You will pass your exams, you write your research paper. Nowadays, even they're having research papers written, at least in part for them. I've been approached for that and I've declined. So at the end of the day, they'll get the qualification. They are highly schooled, but they're not educated. Their ability to contribute to national development is very limited. We meet these individuals. It's not just me. We meet them. They are there. Highly schooled, but capacity to contribute to national development is very limited because they have not been truly educated to a point where they can be change agents. And our learning institutions are full of such individuals, sorry to say. But this is part of things that we must talk about. So unless we facilitate change in mindset, our reading culture changes, our attitude towards schooling changes so that we become truly educated, we will not tap into even knowledge that is currently available with us. It is there, it is unused, and we keep looking for answers elsewhere other than within ourselves.
That was fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, if you've got any question, comment before we can move on to the closing remarks, and also allow all our guests to make their last comments or closing remarks.
Yeah, it's a comment. I kind of like the emphasis of being schooled but not educated. I think it is actually a very, very big problem in part of our African culture, where we think these badges of honor, having a PhD, when at the end of the day, instead of applying that PhD, somebody might be just doing transport requisition in a department, rather than using that knowledge to make the change. And you've put it very, very bluntly, change agent. And again, if we kind of do all that, all our research, can you imagine if you look at how many people Zambia's contribute to Wikipedia? I think Zambia's got the lowest number. So somebody's actually telling us about us, not us telling the world about us, which is, telling in itself. If you look at the number of articles published, peer-reviewed, very few coming out of Zambia. Yet, as Jenny pointed out, they're doing a fantastic research there. And I believe, someone has to be there as well to kind of get that, then write some articles, then other people pick it up, make it implementable and scale it. And then, because it's knowledge, we can, going forward, who knows, we can even have our own, creating patents for certain things that we are creating. So that is really, because I'm passionate about knowledge. Our knowledge ecosystem is very, very poor. And one of the issues that you've raised is the reading culture. I hope our education system is geared towards that.
And are you going to make a comment, Christian, or will you make a comment on your closing remarks?
I think I can wait for my closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing, Christian, Mr. Bimbe has mentioned a very important point on data research. It looks like we haven't invested a lot of money on research, and even these plans you're talking about, Christian, or policy formulation by the government should be based on empirical data, should be based on well-researched data. So how are we going to implement these plans if we don't have any, you know, you've mentioned we've got so many schooled people with PhDs. Where are those journals? Where is that data? Where is that research, well-researched data that the government can use to formulate, an agricultural sector plan? Yeah. So you can comment on that before we come to the closing remarks.
You know, by God's grace, there is always a remnant. Even when a situation is very bad, there is always a remnant of individuals and maybe even institutions that have not gone the way of the majority, even if things have gone wrong. And I know that within the ministry itself and other places, there are individuals that are actually very different and given opportunity will do things differently. Okay, so I think we need to identify champions. Zambia is a very small country where it doesn't need a lot of people to change the whole country. We need champions within the system and outside who are willing to step up and say they are willing to lead this process of doing things differently using knowledge-based kind of planning. We don't even have to look at journals as a starting point. Within the ministry itself, there is enough information. There are programs that have run by donor agencies. Reports have been written, shared with the ministry. The ministry has also run programs and they have come to an end. Reports and lessons have been captured. There are national planning processes that have been implemented within the ministry or within government as a whole, where a lot of knowledge has been brought together and it has just been underutilized. So I think the starting point, we need leadership from the top that gives marching orders to identify individuals that can step forward, that can begin the process. There will be other adapters that come in, and before long, we'll have a critical mass of individuals. The last show I did say that, look, to drive this kind of a process I'm describing does not need more than 15 individuals from a cross-section of backgrounds, okay? 15 individuals, 3 months later, they would have distilled available information from within the ministry and beyond and put forward clear scenarios. Now, this plan must not be straight-jacketed. It's not about technocrats telling a politician your only option is going left. That is not, then you don't know how to plan. Proper planning is creating different scenarios and options and allowing the duty bearer, based on what is important to them, to say, because I feel this is important, at this point, I'll turn left. At that point, what are my options? Okay, I'll turn right. At another point, I feel that I can't go right, I'll go left. But all those turns that the duty bearer is making is informed by the scenarios you created. So even when they exercise their choice, they're not going outside what is supported by science, okay? What is supported by well thought through mechanisms. So either way, they still arrive. So my role as a technocrat is to help provide those options. And then the duty bearer exercises their options and still ends up there using a route that is most comfortable to them given their interests. That is what this group is supposed to do, okay? And information lies within the ministry as a starting point, but there is obviously the journals that are still available that can be accessed. There are small fees to be paid. You can access certain very good publications, and we can distill knowledge from there, incorporate it, and begin to move. And continue learning, because the learning will not stop. The evolution will not stop. We'll not get it right within the first 1 or 2 years, but with time, we're going to institutionalize this approach It's going to become the normal way of doing things. So that going forward, if we're thinking of agriculture or any other sphere later on, we will know that there has to be a mechanism that makes sure that when we start implementing, we know where we're going and we have given the duty bearers the option to make the decisions. This should become a normal thing, okay? It should become institutionalized. And once it starts showing benefits, it will be adopted by other sectors of Zambian economy and even by other countries. You'll be surprised. Like we're already learning from other countries right now. Many will come and learn from us.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Christian. Before we go to the closing remarks, there is our friend here who is in the studio, Alec Chilwa. He's just said, just to add on, there is also a lot of inertia in identifying talent. Many have had to rise to management position by favor, or someone knows them, or because of that, there is a gap. There is very little innovation being applied, and that has caused inertia. I don't know, Alec, are you able to just add on to that before uh, Dr. Christian answers that? Over to you, Alec.
Hello.
Hello, Alec.
Yes,
You
are
are-
you able to get me?
Yes, 100%.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think on that one, what I mean is that you see, I'm just trying to ride on what Christian has said. Like there's a lot of, like Mr. Vaikach has a lot of manpower and a lot of people who are very educated. Like he said, maybe not educated but schooled, and most of is and that is a very true point. And just talk about maybe why some of the even issues of research and even maybe issues of innovations come to be stored with very good programs which can run through. It's because people who are rise up to where they're supposed to be, maybe policy decision or management decision, they don't rise because it's on merit where they would be able to tell like this one is able to do this. It's because maybe someone has a qualification and then they just say, no, maybe I know this one and it can be here. And most of them become culprits because they take it like it's a favor for them to have risen to such a position. At the end of the day, they sit back because they are not accountable to anyone. And then you find that maybe it's only one person now trying to steer the direction of what should happen. The rest become like zombies because they have no ideas or maybe issues they can put on the table to see they are accountable for this activity which they're supposed to do, or they're accountable for this idea. Or maybe they can defend an innovation which they bring out, which can be the best to be applied. So to me, that also needs to be looked at in terms of human resource, so that those gaps or inertias which are there for people just to sit and not doing anything, or maybe not offering innovations, there is someone to at least jack them up so that they can be able to show that they are there because they are able to do certain things. I think that's the idea of what I was trying to drive. Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Christian. Thank you so much, Alec,
You
for
know,
that
that
contribution.
is a deep and honest reflection of reality. I have worked enough with the Ministry of Agriculture, specifically, let me refer to that ministry, to have seen a lot. To have seen very innovative individuals that can be champions, not being given the opportunity. Okay, all the way to the lowest level. There are individuals that clearly stand out. But the culture is not to encourage those to blossom, okay? Then that issue of individuals being promoted because they are connected to, I have seen this firsthand in the Ministry of Agriculture up to a very senior level. And I've seen how that has killed initiatives worth millions of dollars, okay? Not millions of kwacha. Because the people that are involved in leading those are connected to certain other individuals. And because of that, they don't care. They just don't care. Even when there is clear misuse of resources, but because of the connection this person has. I've seen this in more than one instance. There is a misuse of resources People are just traveling, you know, even if it may not necessarily be theft. But if priority is towards activities that allow me to travel and therefore get subsistence allowances, I've just shortchanged the project, even if I've not outrightly stolen. You know, and there is outright theft, of course, that I may not go into details because that one has to be dealt with differently. But at the end of the day, I've seen efforts not succeed because the individuals that are sitting in positions of authority are coming from connections, and those that are seeing the misuse or the plunder are being very careful, because if they speak up, they know that the senior people are connected. So I'll be a victim, you know. So we have to change that, and we don't need 50 people to change that. You know, there's a region of one African country where a certain individual, let me mention this individual, Katumbi, was governor for Katanga. And in my interactions with at various fora at Africa level, I would meet individuals coming from the civil service in Katanga, okay, and other regions. And one of the things that used to come out is, if you go to Katanga as a civil servant, you must be prepared to work. The person was telling me that as a PhD, okay? He was telling me, if you go to Katanga province as a civil servant, you must be prepared to work, because the leader there is a no-nonsense guy. He wants to produce results. Of course, he might have his own personal interest. He might have been trying to make himself popular and endear himself to the people so that he can come and stand as president. I don't know. He could have had his own reasons, okay? But whatever the reasons, he was trying to make the system work. I'm not saying he did very well. I'm just reporting what I was being told, that the good performing region is Katanga. And if you go to Katanga civil, you must be prepared, because the guy wants to make you, he makes you work. Now, that's just one individual. Imagine if you had 10 of them, even if it's just within one region. If he's supported by his key people, they also subscribe to that same mindset. You can transform the Ministry of Agriculture by just having 5 people sitting in key positions and singing to the same page on the hymn book, and everybody else follows. Everybody else will fall in line, and the very people that were not working hard will begin to work hard, because they are capable. There are some great people in the ministry, but with the right environment, with the right framework, with a clear direction, a lot can come out of this ministry. So there is that needed, without which we have no place on which to rest this plan so that it could be coordinated well.
That's fantastic, Dr. Christian. I know Mr. Bimbe is itching to talk, but let me give an opportunity to Mulele. Mulele, what are your closing remarks or any comments before we close? And Dr. Christian will comment on that at the end. Over to you, Mulele.
Thank you so much. It has been a very interesting conversation. I think Dr. Chileshe has very interesting views, which are very valid. I think your concerns are very valid. And I must mention that I think there is a lot of hope. As the other speaker mentioned, there are people who are there, who are willing and who are capable of delivering and changing the status to a much better one. I just wanted to agree once again with Dr. Chileshe on the issue of mindset. And personally, when I reflect on the way that one of the methods that as individuals we use to prioritize things, one of them is where we look at the urgency and the importance of a matter. For instance, if I am sick, it is agreed that it's urgent for me to go to a hospital or to a clinic. And of course, health is a very important matter. And the other method is we look at, of course, not necessarily a method, but we can look at the quadrants which we can use to make decisions. The other way is to look at a matter which is not urgent, but it's important. And I'll give an example of research. Research is important, but it's not something that is like somebody's about to die and you have to rush them to the hospital. And so we tend to, put forward matters that are important, but they're not urgent. And of course, the other quadrants, there are issues that are not important and not urgent, and they may be not important but urgent. So there are those categorization of prioritization. So for agriculture, it also happens to sit in the quadrant where it is an important issue, but most often it is not urgent, you know. So we tend to push it forward. And because it sits in this space where generally it is important but not urgent, we confuse it with not being important, And so, in terms of resource allocation and just giving it the necessary attention and action that it deserves, we kind of relaxed and think, oh, it's okay. I mean, it's important, yes, but I mean, there's no one who is about to die, so what's the hurry? And so, in agreeing with what was said, um, the biggest issue really should be, how do we change this mindset? I've given I touched on the issue of research. you know I mean, why spend billions of dollars, for instance, or kwachas researching on something which you don't even know whether it will give you a reward or a payback or not? But we have seen the benefits from those that have invested in research. They are doing so much better than ourselves. I think in terms of research, if you look at, say, the USA, it's the leading economy, and they've invested so much in just research, generating knowledge, and then finding ways of how to apply
It looks like we've got a network issue there. You know, Mulele, are you still there?
I think we've lost him.
Yeah.
Mulele?
Mulele, are you still there?
No, we have lost him.
Yeah. Okay. Let's, Mr. Bimbe, Christian, you will be able to comment on that. Or do you want to comment now on that
You
issue?
can send my comment for last. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bimbe, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I don't have much, actually, to say. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and everything that I had in my mind actually has been discussed, and just Mulele, the last comments he was making, which is, is dear to me: knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination and knowledge uptake. That's kind of my specialty, and yes, it is very, very important, and he mentioned it very, very well. Countries like in the West, they haven't developed because they never research. They do a lot of research. That's why they own a lot of intellectual property. China is now doing that, a lot of research in the new sciences. So it is imperative for us to take that seriously and create this learning culture. Anything we implement, we need to be building in how we learn. How do we learn from what we've done? What works? What doesn't work? I think it's very, very important, and be open. The other thing that what Christian has mentioned is there is a lot of data there. Government sits on a lot of information, but yet that information is just closed up. It's not opened up. Yes, someone might sit in an office full of this data, They don't know how to use it. But if you liberate that data, there will be people out there who can use that knowledge to create products, to create services, or even improve processes that are happening. So it's very, very important. And I think, as Christian says, probably they need to be pushed into really identifying what is there as urgently as possible. So that, to me, is my closing remarks.
Mr. Bimbe, that was fantastic. Mulele, you back. Do you want to finish what you wanted to finish? Over to you.
Oh yes, thank you so much. I lost my connectivity.
Yeah.
Basically,
you were talking about countries like America investing in research, and now they're applying that research. So you can continue from there.
oh yes. So really, I was just trying to give an example of generally how we tend to prioritize things as individuals, perhaps as organizations as well. And then I think we need to have a clear understanding of, I feel it's part of the reason why there's this procrastination, if I can say, when it comes to investing the way we should when it comes to agriculture, because, as I said, that importance and agency, they are confused. People tend to think, okay, because it's not urgent, then it's not so important, but it's not the case. There are certain things that we have to remember, like educating our children, for instance. It may not look urgent. It may not be urgent, but we know it's very important, because if we neglect that now, a few years from now, we'll have a disaster. And that's the thinking that we need to apply to the agricultural sector as well. And when we have that mindset, then we will no longer be postponing and pushing things forward. So one of the critical questions to ask then is, how do we get that change of mindset? If we can have a clear answer to that, it will be one of the catalysts, I think, to help us to attain that change that we so badly need. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, over to you, Dr. Chileshe, on the comments our colleagues have made. And Amulele, thank you so much for that closing remarks and the comments. Over to you, Dr. Chileshe.
Change within the governance system has come. We have examples. Have come in two ways. One is where you have a leader that identifies change agents from within and places them in positions of authority so that they have the ability to effect the change. Okay? So they must have different mindsets, and sometimes you pick them from outside the country. Sometimes it's Zambians or whatever nationals of a different country. This is not Zambia that I know of these examples. They come from certain parts of the world. They are in the diaspora. They are brought back, okay? Because they have been exposed to a different environment, they have a different way of doing things. So maybe they're not affected by the something negative about practice locally. So they become change agent. I can tell you Kenya is an example where they've tried that in one area and it worked very well, okay? And some Caribbean countries have done that. So from within the institutions or from outside, but these are nationals. I know of instances where political leaders have brought experts, change management experts. Some of them have come straight to start first helping the cabinet because the president is saying, I want to change my team. These are the people who then they need to cascade downwards. It must start with my team. We've had non-change agents, international renowned individuals, expensive. They are brought, and he says, look, start with my cabinet. Work with them in such a way that they can start seeing what I'm seeing, and they can be my extension of me, so that things can begin to trickle down and happen. Okay, so I know of such cases that have happened. But a leader that has realized they need to create change can use one of many options or a combination of such options. You cannot just sit back and watch a problem and complain and think you are the only one who can solve a country's problem. In the end, you begin to overuse a president because they become the one who's doing just about everything. True leadership is actually finding a way of multiplying yourself so that there are others who can actually do or think the way you think. If you can't find them, find people who can come and create that kind of thinking from within. Okay, so that is important. You'll be amazed when the example of planning, you'll be amazed how we plan, even at very high level. Because we do not think planning is a discipline, we end up with the loudest voices winning the day, the most senior of the voices winning the day, or the most well-connected, winning the day, and we drown out others who may have very useful and important input. Okay, that is why often we get an external facilitator to lead the planning session, because they're able to even tell the overall leader, please, can you hold on? Let's allow this other person, because they're not in the hierarchy. So they don't have to respect authority within that system. Okay, you should listen, see how planning is done, without due respect to the fact that planning is a discipline in itself. Okay, that's something that's critical. My last point that I just want to make as I close is that when we have developed a plan, you give it 3 dimensions. Okay, one is you're able to break it down from a summary that is like a dashboard, very few figures consolidated for someone at a very high level to see. But there must be a possibility of drilling down, many levels down, to a very basic level. What are the building blocks that have come up to that? What parts must be managed by different people or exposed to different people? So there is this vertical where there's a top down. It can be highly summarized, but it can be broken down. That is one dimension. The other dimension is time, because whatever has been planned must sit within a time frame. Okay, so the second dimension is time. So going forward, there is time moving forward. So where does each of these activities and milestones sit over a space of time? That's the second dimension. The third dimension is the interconnectedness with other activities and other institutions, other parts of the broader ecosystem. Okay, so what are the connecting points? Where are they coming out to connect to something outside this primary plan? So you have the kind of a summary to the detail, top down. Then you have time frame going this way, it's the second dimension. And the third dimension is what are the points of interconnectedness with other activities, other institutions where they feed in. Our plan feeds into that, or our plan feeds off that. Okay, so once we are clear in these 3 dimensions, we know this plan will not just be implemented over time. It will influence the entire ecosystem. It can be broken down into small chunks that can be implemented. Things are clear. This is something that is possible and can be done for us. And my argument is we must invest in planning at a national level in agriculture, without which we will talk, another decade will go, and we'll have many missed opportunities. It's a win for all, even those within the political system, because results can be short, even in the short term and in the medium term, and they will build a legacy that will be shown in the long term, even if they're not in office. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chileshe. That was fantastic. And my co-host, Mr. Bimbe, thank you so much. Mulele, thank you so much for such powerful contribution. Alec, thank you so much for your contribution. Our viewers, wherever you've been watching us all over the world, thank you so much for your viewership. And may the good Lord bless our beloved mother, Zambia. Good night and bye for now.